Hey everyone, welcome to Historical World of English, the place where we bring you the latest updates, fun moments, and behind-the-scenes stories you won't want to miss. Early Republic, 1793 to 1830. History of the United States, 1789 to 1815. The United States Electoral College chose George Washington as the first president in 1789. The national capital moved from New York to Philadelphia in 1790 and finally in 1800 to Washington, D.C. The major accomplishment of the Washington administration was the creation of a strong national government that was recognized by all Americans. Washington's government, following the vigorous leadership of Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, assumed the debts of the states, created the Bank of the United States, and set up a uniform system of tariffs and other taxes to pay off the debt and provide a financial infrastructure. Hamilton established the Federalist Party as a means of supporting his plans. In 1791, to assuage the anti-federalists who feared a too powerful central government, the Congress adopted the United States Bill of Rights by amending it to the U.S. Constitution to guarantee individual liberties such as freedom of speech and religious practice. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison formed an opposition Republican Party, usually called the Democratic Republican Party. In 1794, Hamilton and Washington presented the country with the Jay Treaty, which re-established good relations with Britain. The Jeffersonians protested vehemently, and voters voted for one or the other party, establishing the first party system. Although the treaty passed, politics became intensely heated. Serious challenges to the new federal government included the Northwest Indian War, the ongoing Cherokee-American Wars, and the 1794 Whiskey Rebellion, in which Western settlers protested against a federal tax on liquor. Washington set an example for future administrations by refusing to serve more than 2 terms. In the 1796 election, Jefferson was defeated by Federalist Party candidate John Adams. War was looming with France, and the Federalists used the opportunity to try silencing the Republicans with the Alien and Sedition Acts. They also built up a large army with Hamilton at the head in preparation for a French invasion. However, the Federalists became divided after Adams sent a successful peace mission to France that ended the Quasi-War of 1798. Increasing demand for slave labor, slavery in the United States. The status of slavery in the states dramatically changed in the first 2 decades following the Revolutionary War, and the number of free blacks increased. Inspired by revolutionary ideals of equality and influenced by their reduced economic reliance on the use of slaves, the northern states abolished slavery. States of the Upper South made manumission easier, resulting in an increase in the proportion of free blacks in the Upper South as a percentage of the total non-white population, from less than 1% in 1792 to more than 10% by 1810. By that date, a total of 13.5% of all blacks in the United States were free. In 1807, with 4 million slaves already in the United States, Congress severed U.S. involvement with the Atlantic slave trade. Second Great Awakening. The Second Great Awakening was a Protestant revival movement that swept through society at the beginning of the 19th century and accelerated church growth. It began around 1790 and was gaining momentum by 1800. Its membership rose rapidly after 1820 among Baptist and Methodist congregations whose preachers led the movement. It was past its peak by the 1840s. Millions of new evangelicals joined the movement, which also led to the establishment of many reform movements, including abolitionism and temperance. Louisiana and Jeffersonian Republicanism. Presidency of Thomas Jefferson and Louisiana Purchase. Thomas Jefferson heavily defeated John Adams in the 1800 presidential election. The Louisiana Purchase, signed in 1803, was Jefferson's greatest accomplishment as president. It gave American settlers a lot of room to grow west of the Mississippi River. He supported expeditions to explore and map the new domain, most notably the Lewis and Clark expedition. Jefferson believed deeply in republicanism and advocated that it should be based on independent yeoman farmer and planter. He distrusted cities, factories, and banks. He also distrusted the federal government and judges, and he tried to weaken the judiciary. Although the Constitution specified a Supreme Court, its functions were vague until John Marshall, the Chief Justice of the United States, 1801 to 1835, defined them, especially the power to overturn acts of Congress or states that violated the Constitution, first enunciated in 1803 in the Marbury v. Madison case. War of 1812. War of 1812. Additionally, see the United States' history from 1789 to 1815. During the early 19th century, Anglo-American relations deteriorated for a variety of reasons. British authorities began seizing American merchant ships trading with France and its allies, which intensified with the 1807 Orders in Council. Congress had passed the Embargo Act of 1807 in an unsuccessful effort to coerce Britain to rescind the orders, which ultimately hurt the American economy more than the British. The Royal Navy, angered by thousands of its sailors deserting and finding work on American merchantmen, began stopping U.S. ships and reclaiming alleged deserters. In order to establish an Indian barrier state and halt American expansionism, Britain also supported Native Americans resisting American colonization. Many American politicians also wished to occupy Canada, either as a bargaining chip for Anglo-American negotiations or to retain it as part of the U.S. Despite strong opposition from the Northeast, especially from Federalists who did not want to disrupt trade with Britain, Congress declared war on the United Kingdom on June 18, 1812. Both sides tried to invade the other and were repelled. Multiple American invasions of Canada were unsuccessful due to the soldiers' reluctance to leave home and the ineffectiveness of the American militia. British blockades ruined American commerce, bankrupted the treasury, and further angered New Englanders who began smuggling supplies to Britain. Under General William Henry Harrison, the Americans eventually gained naval control of Lake Erie and defeated the Indians under Tecumseh in Canada, while Andrew Jackson ended the Indian threat in the Southeast. There was an end to the Indian threat of permanent expansion into the Midwest. A lot of Maine was taken over and invaded by the British. In 1814, the British attacked Washington and set it on fire, but they were stopped at Baltimore, where they wrote the Star-Spangled Banner to celebrate America's success. At the Battle of Plattsburgh in upstate New York, a significant British invasion of New York State was defeated, and at the Battle of New Orleans in early 1815, Jackson decisively defeated another invasion. The battle at New Orleans had occurred after peace had been signed between American and Britain in the Treaty of Ghent, but news of the treaty had not reached Louisiana before the battle occurred. Though the war had ended inconclusively and the U.S. had achieved few of war aims laid out in 1812, Jackson's victory at New Orleans led pro-war Americans to call it a Second War of Independence. The War of 1812 also dispelled America's misconception that a standing army was preferable to poorly trained and ill-equipped militias.
Era of good feelings. National euphoria after the victory at New Orleans ruined the prestige of the Federalists, and they no longer played a significant role as a political party. President Madison and most of the Republicans realized they had been foolish to allow the First Bank of the United States to close down, for its absence had greatly hindered the financing of the war. In 1816, they chartered the Second Bank of the United States with the assistance of foreign bankers. The Republicans also imposed tariffs designed to protect the infant industries that had been created when Britain was blockading the U.S. Society entered an era of good feelings and eliminated the first-party system as a result of the Federalists' demise as a political party, the Republicans' adoption of many Federalist principles, and President James Monroe's deliberate strategy to minimize partisanship during his 2 terms in office, from 1817 to 1825. The Monroe Doctrine, which was proclaimed in 1823, stated the idealistic position of the United States that European powers should no longer colonize or interfere in the Americas. A turning point in U.S. foreign policy occurred at this time. President Andrew Jackson ran for a 2nd term in 1832 under the slogan, "Jackson and no bank," but he did not renew the charter of the Second Bank, which led to the bank's dissolution in 1836. Because he was convinced that the elite used central banking to exploit the average American, he decided to establish publicly owned banks, or pet banks, in a number of states in the United States.